Hey, what's going on today, YouTube? So, the title says it all. Why might it be more efficient to learn 200 new cards a day? So, to give you some context, I'm gonna go about why this initial thought popped up in my head, and I'll be showing you my Anki stats for the past week. So if you've been following my channel, you know that last week I tried to finish the JP1K deck in 1 week, and I succeeded in doing so in 4 days. What we're going to take a look at right now are the stats and where I'm at now about 12 days after starting that challenge. So today I finished the reviews in less than 30 minutes, so 27.89 minutes. I studied 168 cards with an again count of only 11% at 19 agains. And so if we take a look at the future due, it doesn't look anything close to 200 plus, 300 plus cards due. And if we scroll down to my reviews, you'll see the curve that I'm going to explain a little bit later on in the video and why I'm basing my little proposal off of this thing that popped up in my head. So if we take a look at the initial day, I had 1,240 reviews. I had done 411 cards that day. Granted, I knew quite a bit of those cards because I had been studying Japanese for a while, but as the days progressed, as new cards started getting introduced, I started coming to more difficult kanji that I haven't seen, but I was still able to get through the reviews. So day 2, we had 1,200, day 3, 1,100, day 4, around 1,100, and then after that, that was day 4, I'd finished the deck. The next day, you see it drops down to 732, next 515, 300, 300, 200, all the way until where I'm at now, where it's averaging around 100 or so reviews, 150 so reviews per day. And so that's the point that I'm at right now. And I've got to be honest with you, right now it's smooth sailing. Like the cards that I have to hit again, I'm able to get them on the second time around right off the bat. And these are new kanji. These are cards that I hadn't come across before, but I'm able to recall. So maybe I'd come across it in my immersion because the JP1K deck is the 1,000 most frequent cards. So maybe it's because of that, but we'll never know until I do another type of test, which I'm going to plan on doing in the future. So if we take a look at my retention rate, I don't have mature cards yet. So what really matters are what my mature retention rate is. Young and learning don't really matter for retention rate, but if you care about that, I have 61% for the learning cards. That stopped after day 4, and then 77.33% retention rate for the current cards that I have right now. As I'm continuing to study, I believe this number is going to go up. And when I hit my mature cards, I believe that one is going to be at around the 85 to 90% mark, which is going to be where I should be at. And so these are the Anki stats that I'm going off of. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit more about why I'm proposing that it might be better to learn as fast as possible in the beginning than it is to space it out over time. Now with this, I do think there are some limitations. I think that 1,000 to 1,500 cards is going to be the absolute maximum amount of new cards that you're going to want to try to learn in a batch. The reason I'm saying this is if you do something ridiculous like 5,000 or 10,000 cards, there is no way you're going to be able to get through that in 1 week, and you're going to be spending so much time on Anki in 2 to 3 to 4 weeks to get all those finished in the beginning. So I don't recommend it for something like 10,000 or 5,000 new cards. With that being said, what I'm going to base it off of is you're trying to learn 1,000 new cards, say the JP1K deck. So why might this be more effective and more efficient than say 20 to 30 new cards per day? A couple of numbers to think about are, if you're doing 20 new cards per day, by about week 2, you're going to have 140 reviews per day. So if we do a little bit of quick math, if you've been learning 20 new cards per day for 14 days, at the end of that 14 days, you're going to have 280 cards known or that you've come across. So let's say we bumped it up a little bit and you are learning 50 new cards per day. At the end of that 14 days, you're going to have around 700 new cards that you're known, but your review count is going to be around 350 reviews per day, and that number is going to stay with you all the way until you finish 1,000 new cards or 1,500 new cards. Now that can get real tiresome. With this strategy that I'm proposing, if you do 200 new cards per day, you will be offloading the work to the front, but you'll be finishing the cards as soon as possible. You'll be finishing the new cards as soon as possible. And what'll end up happening is your reviews are going to be down. It's not going to exponentially increase and plateau. It's going to start very high but decrease as you continue along in the weeks, and you'll be at around the 140 reviews per day that I'm doing at 2 weeks in. And instead of only knowing about 700 cards, you'll have known 1,000 cards by now. So what are the benefits? Of course, learning new cards is a big benefit here, but while you're doing these Anki reviews, what you are going to be doing, especially if you're language learning, is doing active immersion at the same time. And so in the beginning, you might not have enough time in the day to do active immersion. In my opinion, I think if you're going to be going hard at it for 5 days, this should be okay. But after those 5 days are done, you should be doing active immersion while you're doing the Anki reviews. And this, because you've come across 1,000 words, when you come across these words in immersion, it should stick with your memory a little bit better. I don't have any proof of this. This is just my proposal or my guess. But as you see these cards more and more in your immersion by day 14 and by week 3 or day 21, these cards will become more cemented in your memory than, say, if you were learning 20 new cards per day, 40 new cards per day, or even 50 new cards per day. And so another benefit I see of this is that once you get past that huge load of reviews and cards in the beginning, so once you get past all that in the first week, you're not going to be really worrying about Anki too much because you'll have less and less reviews. Therefore, you'll be able to spend more time actually actively immersing, which is going to be way more beneficial for your language acquisition than continually grinding out new Anki cards per day. And so by jumpstarting your comprehension, so to speak, by learning 1,000 new cards in a week, by coming across those 1,000 new cards in the beginning, you're going to be able to understand your immersion content much better than if you only had 200, 300, or 500 cards in your word bank. And so I think that is the bulk of my message for why I think learning so many new cards is going to be beneficial. So I've got to go into a couple of cons, and I think the most obvious con here is a lack of time. So I know if you don't have the time, this is absolutely not going to be possible. You will not be able to do this if you don't have enough time in the day. To give an example, I was spending around 3 hours the first day. By the end of the 4th day, I was at around 5 hours for Anki. And so I know not everyone can do that. So you can break it up into smaller bits. You can try to get through, instead of 1,000, try to do a burst of 500. You can do other different ways to get through these reviews so that you don't have to continually introduce new cards per day. The second caveat that I can see is I don't actually know how hard this would be for an absolute beginner in the language. So when I did this last week, I had already been immersing for about 10 months, but despite that, I still came across, I would say, around 600 to 700 new kanji combinations and words possibly in that frequency list. Obviously, I had heard them because I had been immersing in anime, and so my exposure to the language might have jump-started or might have made this easier on me. And so I don't know how an absolute beginner will handle a load such as this. I have yet to try it out. I will be trying this little theory out with a different language, but as of now, not yet. A little quick note, if you are watching this video and you're an absolute beginner, maybe you can try it and actually let me know how it turns out. That might add a little bit to it, possibly. And the last caveat that I can think about is very early Anki burnout. And so if you burn out of Anki, it's over. So what I was doing in the beginning was I was doing around 1,000 plus reviews per day for about 4 to 5 days in a row. That can get very tiring. So if you burn out in that short period of time, then it's no use at all, and it would be better to just space it out. But if you have the mental capacity, if you have the time, and if you have the motivation and drive, I think this might be a more effective and more efficient way to go about Anki for language learning than it is doing 20 new cards per day. And so with that is the bulk of what I wanted to say, the pros and cons of the method that I'm proposing. But also what I should set is some criteria. So I'm going to base it off of the JP1K criteria, and that is going to be, I'm going to show it right here. And so here's the criteria on the left, but I'm going to sum it up real quickly. So if you can recall the meaning based on the kanji or the hiragana reading, then you pass the card. And so that is the criteria for being able to pass the cards in this deck. And that's about it. And I know this can be a little bit controversial, so that's why I'm just proposing it. I'm not saying it's the best way to do it, but it might be. So I had actually tried doing 50 new cards per day back in March, and it was not a fun experience, but somehow learning 1,000 new cards or 1,000 cards in a week, it's been much more fun than trying to learn 50 new cards per day in Anki. And as a last note, in no way am I saying that 10 to 20 new cards per day is actually a bad thing. In fact, that's the way that I've done it for the most part. But this might be a different way if you want to jumpstart your language learning, or for advanced learners, maybe increasing vocabulary in a less stressful way than saying doing like 50 new cards per day. So if you watch the video all the way through, what do you think? In your Anki experience, do you think this would be an actual viable method, or do you think you would burn out in the beginning or just not remember anything in the beginning? So I'd like to hear what everyone thinks. I'm going to continue tracking my progress and following my progress in the JP1K deck for the next month until they become mature cards, and I'll update that retention rate then. But just wanted to release a video on this thought that had popped up in my head, because I think it might be an optimal way and an efficient way to study in Anki for language learning. So that's all I had for today. As always, good luck in your studies, and I'll see you again in a future video.